Okay, so we had a Rebbe Lezer in our Mishnah that says Poiter Achi Yaakov is Kula. A kazayas alone wouldn't be enough. You have to be makriv the entire payment or lavoina. Otherwise, you're not going to be chayav for shchutei chutz. The problem is we have another brisa that says hamakter kazayas b'chutz chayav, which was a stira, and the Gemara brings another brisa. Yeah, the Gemara and Rav said that Rabbi Elazar's moida as well, right? Baha afilu Rabbi Eliezer moida that it's chayiv. So it's a stira because in our Mishnah it says there's a machlokes, and here it says Rabbi Elazar's moida. That was the Gemara's kasha we were dealing with. So the Gemara wanted to say that maybe we're speaking about two different types of kataris. Maybe where does it have to be the whole shear? That's the Keter Shem Kippur, which is Melech Havdal. But where is it enough for Kazayis? If it's just a Kazayis, that's the daily Keteris that would be kosher even with a Kazayis. The problem with that is, what if the Rabbanan could hold? If they're arguing by the Keteris of Yom Kippur, how could the Rabbanan hold that you don't need Melech Havdal? It says Chukar, Gemara says. So we're stuck to find a scenario where there could be a machlokes, because it seems like everybody would hold that on Yom Kippur you need Melech Havdal, and any less would not be a good Aktar b'fnim, and therefore you won't be over for it v'chutz. And everybody holds by the daily Keteris, one Kazayis is enough. So where's their machlokes? The machlokes is by the daily. This is how. I mean, there's a Shaila Pshat of the Gemara, but we're going to talk about the most positive Pshat of the Gemara. We're talking about the daily Keteris. And if we talk about the daily Keteris, then the Chachamim are very understandable as to why they hold even the Kazayis is going to be Mechayiv you. The reason why Rebbe Lezer says your Potter, Amorava Kagoin de Kavinu Shnei Chatzoi B'mona. What they did is you took the two halves. Let's say you're supposed to have a certain amount of keteris. You split it into two pieces, but you put it into one keli. If you just took one piece, one of the two pieces, provided that it was a kazayis, kula al mamoida, that you would be mekayim the mitzvah with the aktara, and if you were marked up a chutz, you'd be chayiv. But here you put it into one keli. What does putting it into one keli affect? How did that change it? So Rashi says, "Hoil v'nosan shnei chatzai pras beklei hakataras beklei hechal kaveh." So the gears is not so good over here, so we'll look at inside. I'll look at the shita lehaktaras hechal. So since you put both halves of the money that was supposed to be placed on the mizbeach for the kataras of the hechal, Kaveh mana, maybe the mana makes it into one matana, and then not putting all of it would be considered a matana chseira, and therefore it would not be mekayim the mitzvah kataris. And therefore v'chazer kol shu mifsal. So maybe the keli makes it into one piece, and if you don't put in the whole piece of what's available, then you're not going to be yotze. Hilchach b'chutz lo mechayiv. Therefore, the parallel Haktorah b'chutz would not be mechayiv you als Haktorah b'chutz achiyakim is kuli. So that could be the machlokes of Rabbi Elazar Rabbanan. When they have two pieces that are in one keli, does the keli combine them into one matana, and therefore it would invalidate it if you weren't makir the entire matana. Omar Rava. So this is where we're up to. Omar Rava hashta leman the Omar the kviyusa the mana v'loy klumu, which is the Rabbanon, right? And they hold, even if you have these two pieces inside the keli, doesn't matter. Each piece on its own would be a good haktarah. What would be if kava shisha lapar, you set aside in one keli 6 lugan of wine, which would be the nesachim that would accompany a carbon that was a par. Umashach mehen arba, and you pulled 4 out. Vikrivan bechutz chayiv. I, the it's part of the larger amount. The teretz is the keli was not kaveyait, so it's not called a matanach seira. And 4 is also a valid carbon sometimes. You know what that is? Shiruin la'ayil. If it would have been an ayil carbon, 4 is the total amount of loigin that you need. How about you had it prepared for an ayil? And kavar ba la'ayil u'moshach men shloisha v'krivim b'chutz. That would also be chayiv. You know why? Because that would also be a carbon shiruin l'keves. It would be good for a keves, for a sheep. So therefore, since the fact that it was in the keli, designated for a certain purpose, doesn't make it that now it's one unit, and you could separate part of it out, and as long as that you separate it out is also royal carbon, if you were makrid b'chutz, or you were menasach b'chutz, there'd be a chiv of kares, there'd be a chiv of kares, or chatas b'shogeg al shchutichot. What about chasru kol? What if the matana was missing, which our Mishnah says, the krivan b'chutz, and you're makrid b'chutz potter, because that same situation, if you would be makrid b'fnim, it wouldn't be a good aktar, it would be chaser. Rav Ashi Omar, you can't bring a raya. So Ashi is going back to what we learned yesterday. Yesterday, before we had to come on to this last pshat, the Gemara rejected an earlier pshat. And the earlier pshat that the Gemara rejected was maybe the machloikis is by the Ketarish of Yom Kippur. The Ketarish of Yom Kippur, if it's missing a mashu from the Malach Chavnov, it's going to be possible, right? So the Gemara said maybe the Rabbanan hold Yalfinon Penim Michutz. And maybe the balt by the daily Ketarish. If you were only makter a kazayis, it would be mechayiv you. If you were makter kazayis b'chutz, it would be mechayiv you, mechayiv kares. So maybe the panim as well, maybe the kares that's supposed to be put in the kodesh kadoshim in Yom Kippur, which there is a specific shir of lechavnav, maybe legabe being over al chutz, maybe you would still be the same shir as what the shir would be for the daily kares. Now that was a difficult svara to understand, of course, because isn't it linked to each other? Whatever you would be mekayim the mitzvah with pipnim, that's what's prohibited b'chutz. Right? But the Gemara wanted to say an innovative shot that no, maybe it's not linked together. Maybe to be mekayim the mitzvah, you need to have the full melech hafnav. But since you see by the daily kataris, even one kazayis of it that you were mila b'chutz is mechayiv you, so maybe huadin that shear is enough to be mechayiv you for being mila b'chutz, even the kataris of Yom Kippur. That's what the Gemara suggested. And the Gemara rejected that svara, because the Gemara said, Hasha chutz michutz lo yalfinon. We don't even say that two things that are supposed to be b'chutz, we don't say that you learn one shir from the other. And the example that was given was the brisa that at the bottom of Kuf Tes Beis, about 8 lines from the bottom. The brisa the Tanya, Yochel hamayla, pachas mikazayis koimet, upachas mikazayis emurin. V'amenasach pachas mishloshi lugin yayin yechayiv. Talmud loyman lasois ala shalom chayiv has to be a complete shir. But if you can learn the shir of one from the other, lagabe being mechayiv for chutz, so what's the shir of Maila? It's a kazayas, right? So I was saying maybe if I had a kazayas of yayin or kazayas of mayim that I was menasach out, maybe that should also be mechayiv. Even though in order to be mekayim the mitzvah, you need 3 lugin, nevertheless, maybe to be over, you just look at other things that have a smaller share. Maybe a kazai should be enough. Elamai, you don't even learn chutz from chutz. These are both things that you have to do on the mizbech chitzon, and you don't even learn one from the other. So you're going to learn Torahs, which you have to be makter lefnai lefnim and say that its shir should be a kazayis. That was the Gemara's kasha, and because of that, the Gemara had to reject this pshat. Otherwise, it would have been a good pshat. You could have said that the Torah should be fnim, even though to be good Ketores, to be Mekayim the mitzvah, that's the Melech Hafnav, but maybe to be Mechayiv Yot Chutz, a Kazayis would be enough. The Hora, you see how a different type of Ketores, a Kazayis would be Mechayiv you. The Kasha was, because you see from Loigin, we don't say that Loigin, the Kazayis should be enough. We say you need the 3 Loigin. Zogt, the Gemara, maybe not. Maybe that's not such a Kasha. Why? Rav Ashi Omer nisach me'aktara lo yalfi rabbanan. Really, you could learn chutz from chutz. Why there isn't? Because we're talking about a kazayis of a koimitz versus loigen of water or of wine. They're two different avodas. Haktar of kataris from haktar of kataris, even though pnei chutz you can learn, but to learn nisuch from haktara, that's two things that have no connection. So zok to Gemara, Rabbi Shem and nisuch haktar lo yalfi rabbanan. Aval gav the chutz mechutz lo yalfi, even though chutz mechutz lo yalfi, but haktara me'aktara yalfi, aval gav the chutz mipnim. You could learn haktara from haktara. The reason why you couldn't learn chutz mechutz is because that was nisuch me'aktara. Nisuch from haktara you're not going to learn, but haktara from haktara you will learn. And the author will say, even though to be yoytz to the mitzvah of Yom Kippur, but to be over haktara b'chutz, you'll even be over with the kazayis. V'haraya, you see the daily kataris, you'll be over haktaris chutz with the mir kazayis, and that will be the sheet of the Rabbanan. And Rabbi Lazar will argue and say, no such thing. Whatever would be mekam the mitzvah of him, that's what you need to do to be over haktara b'chutz. Zok Gemara, v'chulon shachasru. The Mishnah said that if you were missing from the shir, that you would not be mekayim the mitzvah b'fnim, you could no longer be over being makav or mak to that b'chutz. Ibaylu. What about chisaron the chutz? What happens if it was b'fnim and it was complete, and you could have been makter it on the mizbech and it would have been perfect? After it came out of the azara, where it's possible anyway, al tiyoytze, then some of it went missing. So do you say shmei chisaron, and therefore, if you were makar of it b'chutz, you will not be mechuyev? Or loy shmei chisaron, or maybe it doesn't really matter anymore. Once it's possible anyway, so you'll be mechuyev even though you don't have the full amount, because while it was in the azara, you did have the full amount. Mi'arin kiven the nafak, if still became possible anyway, mali chas and mali yes, what does it make a difference anymore? Dilma, no, yoytze the isa be'enei in the lesser be'enei loy. Yeah, yoytze wouldn't be the problem, and even though it's yoytze, you'll still be over, but you got to have it there. That was the Gemara Shaila. Lotzi Rashi, chisaron the chutz, haitzion shleimim luchutz v'chasru libut. You had the full kazayis that you took out, but then someone missing. Do you say shmei chisaron, and therefore v'mhela as a meshuriya b'chutz will be potter, or lo shmei chisaron v'chayiv l'rabanon ki ilu kulakayim? Of course, this is only a shal according to Rabban, not according to Rabbi Eliezer, because of course Rabbi Eliezer holds you have to be makter b'chutz exactly what you would have been makter b'fnim. Zok to Gemara, do you say if salei ba'filu achi b'chayiv lo b'chutz? It's possible anyway after yoytze, and it's still chayiv. So I bezoi mali yoytze mali chisaron, or not? Zok to Gemara Tashma. Rabbi Eliezer poiter achi yakir v'skulam. You see, Rabbi Eliezer says you have to be makter of everything. So alma kulabin, you see, you need everything. Amalei Rabbi Bar Bachana Labaye Midir Rabbi Eliezer Pashut Mar. You're bringing a rye from Rabbi Eliezer. Our whole shaila is according to the Rabbanan, as Rashi says. Midir Rabbi Eliezer Pashut Mar Bitmiya. Rabbi Eliezer Afilu Bechulakayim Nami Potter. He held even if it was complete in existence, it would be Potter. Vanan the Rabbanan Miboilan. Our whole shaila is only according to the Rabbanan. The Mechayve Bekulakayim. He would be Mechayve Bekulakayim. Umoidu B'Shechasar B'Fnim. And he's moided that if it was already missing b'fnim, where you couldn't have possibly done the mitzvah, then it would be a potter. There wouldn't be a chiyuv for chutz. So zok to Gemara, Amar lei, it's not stam. I'm bringing a right from Eliezer. Befeir shmiya liminei the Rav. I heard mefurish from Rav or Demar. The shita changed it to Mar. I befeirish heard. Ad kan loy polag Rabban alei Rabbi Eliezer. How, to what extent is there a machlokes where Rabbi Eliezer potters you because it's missing some, and there are Rabbanon's mechayev you? That's only the isa b'einei. If in fact it's there, you just weren't makriv at all. Alva b'chasaron, but if it's missing, moidulei that it's going to be potter. So zok to Gemara, Mar said beferish that the Rabbanan would be moided to Rabbi Eliezer. If some of it went missing, it would be would be potter. So what does this mean? The words of Mar. Lab the chasa b'chutz. It says aval b'chisaron moidulei. So it's machma that if at any time it goes missing, whether some of it went missing when it was still in the Azara, when it was still 100% kosher, or even if some of it went missing after it left the Azara, maybe it would also be kosher. No, that's not how you would vertage the words of Mar. Rather, loy the chasa b'fnim. Adkan lepliger abundant aled Rabbi Lazar el the isa beinei when it's b'fnim. But even when it was b'fnim, it would have been possible. It wouldn't have been enough because something went missing. Then more delay. But avada, once it leaves and it's possible anyway, even if it becomes chaser, it will still get a chiyuv of hakrava b'chutz. So you still don't have a raya to my shaila whether or not a chaser b'chutz would cause that problem. So let's see if you can bring another raya. Tashma v'chulun shechasru. This sounds very much like all this occurred b'chutz. Potter, lav the chasa b'chutz. So at the end of the day, all these different rights that you bring that a chesaron makes it that you should be potter, lav dafka did that chesaron occur once it left the azara. Maybe that chesaron occurred when it was still in the azara, and therefore while it was in the azara, it was already no longer eligible to be put on the mizbeach, and therefore there's no chiyuv for halal or shchutachos. Zog the Heilige Gemara weiter, hamakriv kochim. So here the Gemara said, what did the Mishnah say? If you're makriv kochim and you have basar and a murim together, you'll still be mechuyev for Allah b'chutz, even though the basar is mixed with the murim. Hamakriv kochim ve'murim b'chutz chayiv. Zog the Gemara, I don't understand. Amai, how could it be chayiv v'oike chatzitza? If when you placed the murim was mixed in with the basar, it was still part of that, but they weren't separated. Well, if the basar is on the mizbeach and the murim is inside the basar, well then the murim is not touching the mizbeach, and there's a chatzitza between the murim and the mizbeach. Zok Rashi shabasar ein royu laktara, so it's chaytzet bein murim l'maracha. Udichavasay b'fnim lav haloi. If you were makter that way b'fnim, you wouldn't be Mekayim Daktara. The Rachman Amar Al Ha'etzim Asher Leish. Because all Gadaitach to Mastis Rabbi Yosy, at this point that the Gemara is asking this kasha, that Chatzitz is a problem, we're assuming we're going according to Rabbi Yosy, the Amar Einei Chayiv Achiyala L'Rosh Mizbech Kaktaris Pnim. We had the sheet in the Mishnah, whether or not you could just put it on any rock, b'chutz, and that would be over, or it had to be davka on a Mizbech, right? So if it has to be davka on a Mizbech, this is not called putting it on the mizbech. There's a chatzitza there. Amar Shmuel kishabchan. What's the big deal? You flipped it over so that the bottom side would be the emurin, and the meat will be on top of it. Even if you didn't flip it over and there's meat that's being mafsik between the emurim and the mizbech, you'll still be chayiv. But V'hamani Rabbi Shimoni, who said it's going according to Rabbi Yosy that has to be placed on the mizbech? Rabbi Shimon says it could be anywhere. It could be a rock. It could be anywhere. So it doesn't have to come into contact with anything because it doesn't have to be on anything. Rav Amar, no, even if you hold like Rabbi Yosy, that it has to be dafka on the mizbeach, it's not going to be a chatzitza. You know why? Because min b'mino in a chatzitz. Meat is considered min b'mino with a murin, and therefore it wouldn't be a chatzitza, and it's as if it was placed directly onto the mizbeach. Zok Gemara weiter. Mincha shaloi nikmitza. You never took the kmitza from the mincha, which means it's not royu yet to be huktar, because the haktara is only triggered once you made a kmitza. So what if you never made a kmitza, and then v'kriva b'chutz, you took the whole mincha and you were maktir b'chutz, potter, because it was never something that you could be maktir b'fnim. What about kamtza v'chazer kamtza l'soich? What if you made the kmitza and the kmitza fell back in to the same container that the rest of the mincha was, and now it's all mixed together? So what would be the halach in such a case? Could you be maktir that? So it says that kriva b'chutz, if you're maktir b'chutz, you'd be chayiv. So it's mashma that you'd be able to be maktir b'fnim. So let's see if Rashi says what you would do if this was b'fnim. Kamta v'chazer kamta l'soicha v'kriva b'chutz chayiv shekayoytze b'fnim kshera. If this happened b'fnim, you would put it on the mizbeach. K'ditam ba'komitz nis'arav kumta b'shiyareh lo yaktir. You're talking not allowed to be maktir. You're not allowed to be maktir because there's a halacha that. Oh no, I'm sorry. If the kaimitz gets mixed in, you can't be makter, because how do you know what the kmitza was? You're not supposed to put the shirayim on the mizbech. But vim hikter also labayla. But if you were makter the whole thing, wrongfully it would work. So it's like it still has some effect. So if it still has some effect, if you were makter that I'm in the mizbech, it would be oila, even though you're not supposed to. If you're makter b'chutz, you'll be chayav. Why would it be a good aktar even b'fnim? The shirayim should be bottled in the rive of the kaimitz, as Rashi says. Beruba, v'avakamana lesa. We should look at the kaimitz is not even there. And in Menachos, the Gemara asked this kasha look up aktar's pnim. We're saying you shouldn't be chayiv by aktar b'chutz, but who adin? Why would it be mekayim the haktar if it was b'fnim? Amar b'zeira nemer haktara b'kaimitz. The Torah uses the word haktara when it's talking about the kaimitz, as the pasuk says, "V'kamatz misham maloi chafnav, v'kamatz misham maloi kamtzai, misalta mishamna, v'hiktir hakayna says karasa." So clearly, the Torah used the word haktara to describe placing that kaimitz on the mizbeach. But the nemer haktara b'shirayim, the Torah also uses the word of haktara in reference to the shirayim, and this is going to be an interesting halacha, but we'll get back to it. But just suffice it to say that the word aktar is used by the Torah when we're talking about the shirayim. So therefore we could say ma aktar is kaimitz and kaimitz mevatel chavei, right? Just like when you're being maktar the kaimitz, one kaimitz will not be mevatel another kaimitz. Meaning, if two kaimitz are mixed together, the kaimitz of two different menachos, one wouldn't be bottled on the other. How do you know that? You know where we know it? We know it from the fact that they mixed the dam of the par and the dam of the seir on Yom Kippur. They mixed two damim together and they spritzed them, and the Torah considers it like each one was spritzed. One wasn't bottled. So when it comes to things that you're makter on the mizbeach, never is one bottled the other, even if it's overwhelmingly more. So therefore, ein kaimitz mevatel kaimitz. Avaktar shirayim, ein shirayim mevatel kaimitz. You can compare the shirayim to the kaimitz. So where does the Torah refer to the shirayim with a lashon of aktar? Because if you think about it, you're not supposed to be makter the shirayim. So where would you ever find the Torah use the word haktar in reference to the shirayim? So let's look at the pasuk. The pasuk is ois beis over here of the Torah are kol amincha asher tekriva l'Hashem lo yisasu chametz ki choschor v'hol davash lo yiktir mimenu ish l'Hashem. What do you think about shirayim? The Torah says there's a very famous limud that we learn out of this pasuk. It says lo yisaktir mimenu ish l'Hashem, and we learn any carbon of which its representative has already been hukrav. So take a mincha that the kaimitz you were already makriv, loy saktiru mimenu. You're not allowed to be makriv the shirayim. So this pasuk is the gedarshan loy saktiru mimenu. Don't be makriv the shirayim. There's a lav to put the shirayim of the mincha on the mizbeach because ishel Hashem, because the mimenu leishim, its kaimitz had already been placed on the mizbeach. So in this meruma's way, the lois aktiru is referring to the shirayim. It's telling you don't make aktara of the shirayim. So you see that the word aktara is a word that applies to shirayim as well. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter. Hakaimitz v'alavoina shehikriv es echad mehen b'chutz. We know every mincha you take the kmitza, and then you have to take the lavoina from the mincha and put it onto the kmitza. And in order to be matish the shirayim, in order for the mincha to be nisratza, you have to put the kmitza together with the lavoina. So what if you only did one of them? So you're halfway done. You're in middle. You're in middle of the job. Only one of them you were makriv. You'll be chayiv. Why will you be chayiv? Because it's considered a haktara, according to the Chachamim. But Rabbi Eliezer Poiter, Achi Yaakov is a sheni. Yes, it's a haktara, but it's not a complete haktara. Until the haktara is completed, you won't say that this was considered a haktara. What if echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz? What if you have the kaivitz and you have the levina? So let's say you were makter the levina b'fnim, and then you were makter the kaivitz l'chutz, or vice versa. So now, if you were makter already one half b'fnim, then the second half is completing the haktara. You had to do it b'fnim, and you did it b'chutz. So therefore, chayiv there, everybody holds your chayiv. What about the Shnei Beziche Levoina? The two Beziche Levoina were used to be matir the lechem aponim, and you had to be matir them both before the lechem aponim was given out to the kayanim. Shehikriv is echad mehen b'chutz, and you were matir one of them b'chutz. Chayiv, the chacham hold you chayiv because it's the first half of a haktar that's required. You'll be chayiv, but the blazer pointer achi yakriv es hasheni. Until it's a complete haktar, you are not going to be mechuyev. Echad b'fin b'echad b'chutz would be chayiv, similar to the earlier case, because the one that you're putting b'chutz is the last segment of the haktarah that should have been b'fnim, and you were makterit b'chutz. Gewaltig. Boy Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha had the following shaila. Koimitz ma'u sheyater kenegdoi b'shirayim. Mishra shari or kalushi miklush. A very interesting shaila. We know the kmitza, as we just learned in our Mishnah, is only one part of the matir of the mincha. You have to do the kmitza and you have to be makter levaina. So what if you only did halfway? Do you say it's zero up until the point that the full haktarah was done, both for the levaina and the kmitza? So Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is assuming that no, it's for sure not zero. If you were makter one or the other, it for sure had an impact. What would be? It's not like it's zero until you do everything. If you were makter halfway, either only the mincha and not the levaina, or vice versa, it will have an impact. The question is, what is the impact? Is the impact in kamus or is the impact in echos? So ma'u sheyater kenegdi b'shirayim. Do you say that half of the shirayim becomes mutter? We might not be able to identify which half, but half becomes mutter. Rashi holds you could even say, when I'm being makter the kaimitz, even though I wasn't makter levaina, I wanted to be makter this half of the shirayim. Rashi holds you can even pinpoint which half will be makter. Tosfos holds no, it just means half will be mutter. You just cannot identify which half. Do you say mishra shari? Or do you say kalusha mitlish? No, the whole shirayim still becomes osir, but the iser still remains osir, but the iser becomes weakened, be'echos. So Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is assuming for sure half of the matir that you were maktir for sure has an impact. The question is, does it have an impact in kamus? It would only be matir half the shirayim, or does it have an impact in echos, meaning the iser is weaker? According to who is Rabbi Yitzchak clearing his shaila? Because if you look into it, you're going to see that it's impossible to even justify the basis for his shaila. Because Reb Meir, the Amar Mefaglin, the Chatzi Matir, Reb Meir holds that if you're middle of a matir, you're middle of shechting, you could make it pigel. If it's going according to Reb Meir, then it's for sure mishra shari. As Rashi says, if you're going to hold like Reb Meir, that mefaglin bechatzi matir, meaning pigel bekaimitz oibelavoina. Let's say while he was being maktir the kaimitz, he had a machshavas pigel, but not by the lavoina. Shehikter kaimitz almanas lechel zayis min hashirayim chotl manoi. If you hold that pigel, it must be that he holds that it's completely matir, part of the carbon. And therefore, if it's a matir, it could become pigel. As Rashi explains, Mishra Shari, the iki maktir lay, bishtika, if when he's maktir, the kaimitz, but before he was maktir the levaina, in a kosher oifen, if you're going to say, loy shari kizayis minayu lagamri, no part of the mincha becomes a gatzan hutar, well then how could you say this is a machshav of pigel? The machshava of pigel is only if it's by the matir. How could the machshava of pigel be a machshava of pigel when he's being kaimitz or when he's being matir? This mount on the mizbeach is not a matir. It didn't do anything. It must be that it did do something. Hadumi dizrika be'inon the shari lagarmi. It has to be matir. So according to Reb Meir, there's no shaila here. He has to hold mishra shari, and therefore, even though you only did half of the matir, it could become pigel because the half of the matir it's a 100% matir on half of the carbon. And ia liba de rabbanon, the amri ein mefaglin bechatzi matir. If it's going according to rabbanon that doing part won't be pigel at all, so then maybe it's loy mishra shari v'loy miklish kolish. So then what's the shaila? You're assuming it's either one or the other. Maybe it's C. Maybe it's not A. It's not B. Maybe it's C. That it does nothing at all. Maybe it's zero, and that all gets completed when you're done. So who is Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka asking a Shaila according to? If it's according to Rabbi Meir, it's not a Shaila, it's for sure Mr. Shuri. If it's according to Rabbanon, there's a very strong third option that clearly Rabbi Yitzchak didn't include in his list of options. Zok to Gemara, Ella, let's say it's going according to our Rabbi Eliezer. Zok Rashi, what does it mean to Rabbi Eliezer? Ella, Libid Rabbi Eliezer, Kamaboyi, the Amr lemechayev Allah lechudei bechutz. Remember, Rabbi Eliezer said that if you only maktir one or the other, if it's the first one, of course, if it's the first half, you wouldn't be mechuyev for chutz, right? That's what Rabbi Eliezer said beferish. Rabbi Eliezer said beferish that if you were only maktir the koibitz or you were only maktir the levayna bechutz, there'd be no chiyuv. Therefore, mishum hakim esav kalei Rabbi Yitzchak. That's why, according to Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yitzchak had a shaila dil mashari. Maybe it would be matir, maybe it wouldn't be matir, because you see that Rabbi Eliezer holds that you wouldn't be mechuyev. Elalibid Rabbi Eliezer. In fact, the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer kirabanan svirlei. Are you going to tell me that Rabbi Eliezer holds like Rabbanon? The Amar. I'm sorry. How could you say he's going to Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer kirabanan svirlei. The Amar ein mefagu b'chati mater. Rabbi Eliezer holds like Rabbanon, who holds. Lost power here and everything got shut off. So I just rebooted and we'll go back to where we're holding. I thought Iran hit us with a missile or something.